Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Alright guys, welcome to War Room episode number 24, I believe. Tonight we've got Playing to Win Part 2. We were going to do it last Thursday, but then literally all of us had games, and Skype was being a bitch, so we're even a little bit late tonight. So while I fix everything, we're going to have our guests go around and introduce themselves, starting with Siri, whose idea the Playing to Win theme was. So Siri, take it away.
Hello everyone, I'm Serial Tracks, and SJR Light Lead, and among other things, the co-host of this show. So, welcome back, everyone.
And Carp, who was really nice enough to fill in for us kind of at the last minute here. It was a rough and tumble episode tonight, but introduce yourself, man.
Carpenter from QQ Mercs, senior prop commander, and I don't know what else to say. We just came off of an MCW match with our coalition, which unfortunately went to Night Watch Mercor. But some mixed drop commanding tonight, so we can talk about a little bit of that tonight too.
That's got to have been interesting, but yeah, I'll be excited to hear about it. And then Magician, I just put your cam in the wrong place, but that's fine. I'll get that all fixed. Introduce yourself, man.
I'm Magician from Steel Jaguar Gaming, and one of the drop commanders.
Alright, and last but certainly not least, Heim.
Heim Delight, starter on the House of Lords competitive team, and that's about it.
Alright, so tonight we wanted to do the second part of the Playing to Win episode, which we started many, many moons ago, but we only got through what I had originally planned to be kind of our first half. So tonight we're going to go through and finish it up, really. I think we're focusing tonight on drop commanding specifically, so Siri, this is your baby, take it away.
Okay, this was sort of a logical follow-up to the other discussion we did. That was sort of playing to win on a personal level. This is taking it to the next step. This is when you've got your group of 12 guys together, and sure, they're all decent players, but when you get into an actual match, who calls the shots? Are you just going to run around and do it willy-nilly? Obviously, that's not going to end well, so what ends up happening is that you get one, maybe two guys who are calling the shots and moving people around and doing that strategic level thing. And that's what we call the drop commander. And for somebody who isn't familiar with this sort of strategic game and playing on the high-level organized end of play, this is something completely new. And so you may not have thought about what goes into this. So, fair disclaimer early, this may cover just basic topics, and oh god, what are you doing with the stream, Raffle?
I had to give Heim an image.
So it may cover what
beautiful.
seems basic and just other stuff, but this is aimed at what we hope is going to be the resurgence of interest around, private lobbies and people coming back to the game, and other people who are new to it trying to get into the competitive scene. So, without further ado, the first bit is to start off really basic. What is a drop commander, and what are their primary responsibilities in their own words? Anybody want to jump up at this one, or we'll just go around?
I don't mind starting. So basically, I guess from my perspective, I think it differs from team to team. In my competitive experience throughout other video games, it depends on the game. Like, if someone has a more important position, they're probably going to be a little bit more communicative. But as a drop commander, generally, how I feel it works best is if you're basically trying to keep the ebb and flow of the battle going. You want to basically guide it, and that it requires a lot more than just letting it go and guiding it. You have to pay attention to the mechs that you brought, because that comes with pre-planning. You have to pay attention to how you use those mechs on the field as the battle evolves. It covers a lot of topics, and I generally feel like there's a few different types of drop commanding, and if you guys want to go in depth with a different one, I feel like some others focus on a structural aspect while others focus on that free flowing, taking it as it comes sort of thing. So
Yeah, I would
Anyone
have.
have any?
I'm sorry, I
Go
was
ahead.
just gonna say I would have to agree. For me, like the idea of a drop caller is somebody who, you know, obviously calls out movements, calls out positions, but also the person who is designing your drop deck and who is in charge of ultimately. I don't know. It's kind of like a quarterback in a football team. It's the person that, while it's not actually their fault if you win or lose a game, everybody blames them, which is an aspect that is sometimes hard to forget about or remember.
I think the QB is a good analogy, actually, because it is that sort of decision making and responsibility. The buck stops with the drop caller. Meg and or Carp, do you have anything to add in?
Yeah, I mean, usually the team relies on the overall strategy of the drop commander, and that strategy, whatever the drop commander has in mind, has to plan out his drop deck accordingly. We did an experiment once because there was a debate about bringing the mechs you're good at versus the mechs the drop commander wanted. So I said, okay, let everybody take what they want for this strategy. And it was interesting to see the results of the experiment. Just that there's small things like battlefield confusion. When you have multiples of the same kind of mech and they're moving around, it makes it harder for the enemy team to really focus on a particular mech. But if you have an isolated one-off, I mean, it's very easy to identify that and just hone in on it. So these are the small little things that are additive features or tactics to your strategy, to give your team an overall improvement to your drop deck and strategy. A lot of independent thought is required because drop commander can't micromanage every single person, but I do find myself looking at the minimap a hell of a lot to catch people who are maybe overextending or a little bit out of position or not pushing when a push is called. So these are all things that take you away from the actual fight. So it's a lot of management as a drop commander.
Okay, thanks, Carp. Meg, any last thoughts on the subject? Or
It's
first thoughts?
it's a nice spot to punish your teammates when they think they can do it better. So you just make them drop command. It's a role that I think is probably one of the hardest roles to do consistently well because the game is always changing, and you have to keep up with it. You have to actually do a lot more of the homework than your teammates do. Like you guys are saying, putting together drop decks. Putting together a drop deck is not something that you can just do like on the whim. You can do it depending on who you're facing, but there's a lot of thought that goes into a drop deck. So that person has to make a lot of decisions and then own up to it in the end. Like Rafa was saying, you kind of get the blame when you lose, or you accept the blame because if you made a mistake on the call, I mean, you didn't even give your teammates a chance to win. So there's a lot of pressure in that spot.
So, Meg, if there's a lot of pressure on it and you're the first person that everybody blames, why in God's name would you want to be a drop caller?
Because you're a control freak. Because you can't stand losing if someone else made a mistake.
That's
Maybe
why.
like how-
That's why Harry and I do it. I think is just couldn't stand it. Someone else is calling and they're making a mistake. It's like, no, got to be in charge.
That's one of the things that I like. I'm okay if I make a bad call and something goes wrong, and because of it we lose. Like I can deal with that. but I hate second-guessing my teammates, and it always makes me feel bad when I do it. So I would rather blame myself than somebody else, if that makes sense.
So let's expand this question to the other guys. Why do you drop call, and how did you get into it?
Oh, I'll volunteer. When Kiki first started doing competitive, it was I had to step up basically because nobody else wanted to take the licks, so to speak. So I had to go through a period of pain of figuring out what other teams were doing, getting our butts kicked a lot in the beginning, and then just improving, learning what to avoid, situations that were bad, and then massaging the drop decks to create better synergy over time. And anyone who's tried to drop command in QQ, it gets frustrated initially because they realize actually how hard it is. So I agree with you, Magician. Like when somebody challenges you, it's like, all right, go ahead, step up. And then of course I get crickets sometimes because they don't want to be micromanaging the team or worrying about the drop decks. They just want to point and shoot.
Haim, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I'll start off really quick where I started. I started from a unit called Comstar Regulars, and they weren't really geared towards competitive play, but there were people who were willing, and as long as there were people who were willing, I didn't mind spending time putting stuff together. And we played in Run Hot or Die Season 2, and we ended up getting to the playoffs, which I was pretty happy with, but it was a lot of trial and error for a bit because I felt like I was learning the game, especially the competitive scene. I feel like you really do need a full season of competitive play to really understand what the basic elements of drop commanding are in a competitive drop. So once I got that under my belt, it was like, I kind of understood a lot more, and since then moved on towards, House of Lords, and it's a different style of drop commanding. And I don't know if I should go into it or.
If you want to, feel free.
Like I was saying before, it's that ebb and flow thing. I don't personally feel like there's it's like I guess the best way to put it is if you had a team of drop commanders, where everyone, you have to have this general level of trust with everyone else on your team, because sometimes they should, generally be in the right place depending on the map environment and stuff. And I feel like once you get to that level of gameplay, it becomes kind of a different sort of team cohesion that you have to manage, and it requires input and communication from everyone. Everyone is everyone else's eyes, basically, and the fact that you have 12 people to manage is very difficult for a competitive first-person shooter. Because you have the first-person perspective, you don't have that third-person view like other games might have. So in a first-person shooter, like with games like Call of Duty and Counter-Strike, you have 4v4 or 5v5, whereas 12v12 is it's pretty significant difference.
That's what I seem to be hearing from everybody, is it's sort of
It's good.
Sorry.
It's all good.
Better now?
Yes. The glories
All
of internet.
Okay, so what I'm kind of hearing from everybody is that they started basically as the most experienced player, and then the team was looking for guidance and somebody to take command, and so they ended up stepped up, basically. Yes, no? Accurate?
Yeah, generally it seems
Not really in my current situation, but when I started drop commanding originally, yes. In my current situation, it's because we needed another person because we had so many people that we couldn't only have one drop commander doing it because we just didn't have enough time. And I'll be honest, I haven't been doing it lately because MRBC is over. So I haven't had a match to play, or DC, in a while. But once private lobbies and stuff are out, I think I'm going to try and get back into it because I miss it. But when I originally started out, I was playing with a unit called Legion of Steel. back in like closed beta way back when, and I started because I heard somebody, like the DC we had at the time, ordered us into a bad situation multiple games in a row, and I was just like, that's stupid. I don't agree with that. And so that actually led to me leaving that unit, and with like a core group of like 8 to 10 guys, and then we played by ourselves for a while, and eventually I joined up with 228, and then worked my ass off to get them to trust me enough to let me drop command in a little bit. So that was my road.
Okay. Arguably, though, since you guys are here, you guys are the one who've toughed it out and been successful. How many people do you think just can't get to that level, and what stops them?
Time. It's all about time.
Yeah,
gotta-
they're. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead, Don.
Time is definitely a huge factor. It takes time to get 12 people together. It takes time to get a team that's willing to continue going at it over and over, regardless of whether you fail or succeed, to improve. And I wrote a post on this on Reddit a while back about CI. I had a lot of respect for them because throughout the Run Hot or Die season, they continually, kept at it, practicing. We practiced like 4 days a week for people who weren't really used to that type of environment. And if you get a team like that, you're bound to go somewhere. You're bound to improve yourself because you're keeping your team together. And it takes a lot out of people when you start arguing in the middle of a drop over what went wrong and stuff, and you start to all micromanage each other. So it gets stressful, and some people have a hard time getting through the stress, or some people have a hard time for the time commitment or the organizational commitment of being a leader, being at the game all the time. So there's a lot of factors that might go into the lack of drop commanders, I guess, in the community, or why it's so hard to become one or do it successfully.
Yeah, you need thick skin to be a draw commander because you've got to be able to roll when you take those losses, and you will get criticized for a bad strat, and sometimes it happens. I mean, it's part of the time thing we're talking about, trial and error, to say, okay, well, shit, that didn't work, or that didn't work for that loadout, and sometimes it's the team's execution, and sometimes it's just a bad call on timing. So getting used to how your team plays, and their confidence in you will build over time too. So generally, the more success you have as a draw commander, the more confidence your team will have, and then execution becomes more seamless.
Okay, so we've kind of gone over who is suitable for a drop caller. Now, let's kind of get into more of the mechanics of what they have to do. So I'm just looking back over, and let's start. It's a similar tangent to the time, is the pre-planning before a drop. What do you, like, how much analysis are you putting into making a drop for different leagues, etc.? What's your process? What are you looking at?
For me, it's about who I'm going to have available for players. I play with like a semi-restricted list of players, so it's who am I going to have available for players? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What have I seen the opponent do in the past? And then I put all of those together, and I put together a build that fits within the restrictions and plays to at least some of the strengths that I have in pilots that are available. Because you can't just, as much as I would like to say that you can just put any pilot in any mech, you can't. You gotta put specific people in specific things. And so that's as general as I can make it, basically.
Anybody else?
Yeah,
Well, go ahead.
I was gonna say I tend to try to see what the opponent that I'm facing has done before, whether there's screenshots or vids, and so that's sort of your gathering intel phase, and then I devise a drop deck that I think would work against what that team has shown on a regular basis, or the type of strategies. Sometimes teams have 2 or more different ways that they'll approach a particular drop deck, but so it's a bit of a guessing game. Combination of what your team is good at, or what the players you have on hand are good at. Very often, I'm trying to assign names in advance to positions, and sometimes those players aren't available, so it kind of throws a wrench in things, and that's the challenge. That's the biggest challenge, really, is having that consistent roster of players that you're going to see every practice or every match.
Okay, thanks, Garb. Meg?
One of the first things I do is I just look for what I think is going to work best. But then it comes down to who's actually playing, who's like good in what max. For example, I could take a 5 assault, 7 light drop deck, but if I only have 4 guys on right at that moment who really are light proficient, then I don't want to take that drop. I want to put people in max that are good. Sometimes how good is something that might not be as good in theory, but works better for us because those people are more proficient in the max they're given.
And when it comes to just theory crafting loadouts and drop decks, like over and above just your personnel selection, how do you do that for different modes? Directed at Meg.
Oh, for different modes? Well, I have spreadsheets of drop decks that I've worked with in the past that I like, or different ones that I might consider. Conquest, of course, you have to think about speed. Are you going to get out caps? So then you got to go through. That's when you start getting scenarios. Is that you start thinking, okay, if they went with this drop deck, would I be able to beat them with the drop deck I'm thinking about taking? And then you might play through different ones and start thinking about which drop deck matches up. Are there any ones that match up better than others? And then, like Carpenter said, looking at what they've taken in the past helps in figuring out those matchups. For example, if you're running 5 lights and they're running 3, okay, we could probably win a cap race if we want to play that style. But if you're going to run 3 lights, they took 5, you're thinking, well, we're going to be in trouble if they start capping like a bigger map, but maybe we can win in the fight. So you take those into consideration when building the deck, and that helps set up what you're trying to do.
Okay, Haim, any thoughts to add to that?
I would be redundant. Basically the same stuff. I'd be echoing what everyone else said.
Fair enough.
I guess a part of pre-planning that you could go into, though, a little bit more detailed is, like, I know Carp, you keep a spreadsheet of all the drops and how each one went and notes about each one. You can recognize patterns through those spreadsheets. I think it was good that when I played with you, Carp, you kept track of that stuff because there were noticeable things you could improve upon, or we did this one night and it worked well this night. And I guess that goes into pre-planning, sort of, because you're trying to plan a drop deck where you're improving upon yourself, or like in a practice sort of thing, or in a competitive match even. Let's say you've been planning to work towards something you improved upon and you finally improved it for the match, and then you use it for the match. So keeping track of all your drops and what you've done well helps with pre-planning a lot, I would say.
Yeah, I've got several different spreadsheets, and I'm a big fan of using Google Drive, so I can share it with the team, and it's it's pretty intense, some of the tracking. But myself and another teammate sat down once a while back, and he had taken all of the practice drops we had, and he sorted it by us versus team. And so we were able to see how many drops we had against different teams and what our record was, and I also know who the threats were on the other team as well, so that when I do end up facing them, I can go back through our drops and say, okay, these were the threats on that team. So the effort to try to focus those players down first is there when the opportunity presents itself.
Okay. So sort of to wrap this topic up, would you say that you personally have a specific signature style that you like to run with your decks? And let's reverse this, starting at Carp.
I kind of like changing it. If I'm in a best of 5 series, I'll flip back and forth depending on who I have on. I might start off and say, okay, you know what, I've got a stronger sniper team set up, so maybe I'll go sniper heavy, and then we might do a drop of one way, and then change it up and do brawling on the next drop. So I like to keep my opponents guessing on what we're actually going to bring to the battlefield.
Gotcha. Haim, how about you?
I think playing on, I think the style I would go for is to play on your strengths. I guess from a personal experience, let's say you want to find a way to counter the current meta, and it's kind of unconventional, but you think you're good at it, so you want to try it anyway. I think it would be good to get good at the meta first, and then to try and play on your strength, sort of thing, like play off of that because you understand it more. Or let's say you're very good at the meta period. I'm not too sure that it's good to veer from what you're best at. I feel like if you keep at it, you can only continue to improve if you play against people. I guess that's just a personal philosophy, though. It's not too much pre-planning against individual opponents, I guess, as it is trying to bring your A game as often as possible, or as often as possible and as consistently as possible.
Gotcha. Meg, what about you? Signature style?
Are you talking about like personal style in calling or in build?
Drop decks. Would you say like Gauss, sniping, brawling, etc.?
No, I don't think there's much of a personal style there. I think it's something that gets worked out over practices and everyone's input on things.
Gotcha. Raffle?
I'd love
A
to
dual Gauss deck?
That's not mine, actually. That's Panic's. But I'd love to say that I've come up with this giant spreadsheet where I keep track of all of my games played and games lost and games won, and have come up with, a game theory game to play out the optimal number of close range baller builds against range, against LRMs. But I haven't, and it's just a matter of who I have at any given time. Personally, I prefer brawling. Just as a style for me as a pilot, and I feel more at home in a giant clusterfuck calling targets than I do sitting back on hills and sniping. So I tend to lean towards that. That hasn't been super viable of late, so I've been a little bit out of my comfort zone, but I'm hoping with the new SRMs it gets a little bit better.
Okay, great, thanks guys. So that's got us sort of the pre-match planning. Now, getting into a match, your responsibilities obviously are mostly where you're moving your people, etc. But that comes through on your comms, your communications. What sets organized groups apart from your random puggy is the fact that you're actually using TeamSpeak or Vent or Mumble if you're really weird
Fuck is Mumble?
to organize your drop. And so communications is the backbone of organized play. But as a drop caller, what is the information that you're relaying to people and from? Like, what is informing your decisions, and what sort of emphasis do you put on your comms?
I guess I'll start. Comms are probably the most important thing, I think, for team play, besides people actually listening. When it comes to information, I want to know, say, from our scouts' lights, I want to know what they're seeing, where they're at, how many there are, what type of chassis it is, perhaps, or what drop, if there's any weapons. Like if someone else is queued up the Mac, has weapons, I want to know that. The updated positions, regular updates on positions, if they've moved, if they don't see them anymore, anything like that, you need to know. And then for how I like to use the comms, I like it to be pretty short and sweet when it can be, but I also sometimes I keep a rolling style where I'll be saying what I'm thinking about. That way it helps some people focus better if they constantly hear the drop commander talking and saying what they're thinking about doing. It allows people to start setting up in case that's what is decided to do. But it also, lets people know why you're calling something that way. That way, if you're saying push B5, it's not just everyone rushing into B5. It's like they're in B5, so we're going to go towards there, or they're behind B5, so we're going to go into B5 to attack them. Now people might have a little bit better understanding of where they want to set up. Lights will understand, for example, then that's what we're going to do. That's what the main force is going to do. So the lights will decide how they're best going to contribute to the attack.
Okay. Anybody have anything to add?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll go ahead. I agree with Mag. I think being as concise as possible is extremely necessary because, like I was saying earlier, having 12 people in channel is managing everyone really isn't too easy of a task. So you don't want to clutter the comms with any extra stuff that probably shouldn't be there, or everyone pretty much knows what that is. But it's good to also, like you said, roll, with what you're thinking, because giving people that pre-planning kind of gives them an idea of what's going on for the next minute or so, maybe, and it kind of keeps things rolling and going in place. So no one has to. Everyone gets their little time to think independently. They have their main objective, and you're just kind of letting things flow for the minute.
It also gives a chance for your other pilots to correct you if something you're thinking is just completely wrong. Been there, done that. Ruffalo Carp, anything to add on this question?
I was just going to say the most important thing that I always look for, and Meg mentioned it, is information from lights. Like, for some reason, I have to know, like, where everybody is. And it's something that I lose track of easily when I'm drop commanding. When I'm just playing, I tend to have a pretty good idea of, like, where the enemy team is. But for some reason, when I'm trying to tell everybody where to go and what to do, I space out on where they are, and I just can't predict movements as well. So having good light scouts is a big thing for me. Other than that, I enjoy when, like, fellow teammates call out, like, weak components on mechs. You can't always cycle through. I don't know how you guys do like target calling, if you do everything individually yourself or if you have somebody else do it. But I enjoy when, like, I have people on my team that are calling out, like, oh, this mech is weak here or there, even if it's not the primary target. That way you know when you switch to it, like, where to be shooting at all times.
Let's hold that thought, because that was actually going to be my next question. Let's just get Carp's answer to this one, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I start off issuing orders for lights. Sometimes I give specific grids to them, and then I let them kind of take it from there. But I like the intel gathering that Magician was talking about, and the constant feedback. Again, the more data, I know my players' voices, so I know what they're in and if they're looking at something. I usually have a pretty good idea of exactly where they're seeing it from, because I'm always looking at the map and the mini map constantly. If you ever watch, well, I haven't streamed in a while, but I got a new video card, so I'll probably start streaming again. But when I was streaming, I'd flip to my map a hell of a lot in the first few minutes of the game, because I'm constantly watching where are they looking at stuff, because people will say, I see this, I see that, and then I'll open the map and say, what grid do you see it in? And so that's kind of how I direct team to move this way or that way based on reactions of the data input. Some of my teammates find that it's a lot of comms chatter, but for me personally, I can filter it because I know who I'm hearing it from, and then I just kind of make a decision there. But it can be confusing for the rest of the team, especially when multiple targets are called with status updates, and then people start getting confused on where to shoot. So that's really just a team discipline thing on being able to filter who's talking.
Okay, and that actually segues nicely into the next topic, which Raffle brought up, which was during the drop, not only are you responsible on the macro scale of moving your guys about, but on the micro scale, you tend to be the one that designates the target. Or at least in my experience, the drop commander tends to be the one calling targets. So that being the case, are you, as the drop caller, the one picking out the targets? And if so, how do you do it? Both in terms of your comms verbiage and what you're prioritizing as a target to take down first. Volunteer?
Priorities usually go like squishy mechs, so things like cataphracts usually tend to be not necessarily XL builds, but they tend to be light on armor if they're heavy on guns, stuff like that. So things that will have high firepower but will go down quick. Another good example is like an AC-20 Jaeger or a Dulgaz Jaeger. Those tend to be things that if you leave them alive will totally mess you up, but if you take them down early because they're squishy, be okay. And then I usually go assault mechs, other heavies, mediums, lights. But lights tend to be taken care of by my lights. That's not really something I concern myself with usually until the end. In terms of like calling individual targets, I usually call like component. So say I'm shooting at a Highlander, it'd be, visual left shoulder, Highlander, Delta, Madge is piloting, stuff like that. I try and say as much info as I can so that nobody is confused about who it is and what they're shooting.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, the calling out the make of the mech and the component is pretty important. I feel like this has been probably one of the more difficult parts of draft commanding. I feel is knowing when to target call and when not to, when someone else should be doing it, and when you're not, because I feel like it has a lot to do with your vision as an individual player. So if you're target calling when you're in the back or something, and you don't have all the information, it's probably not the best as a draft commander. So if you rely on your teammates and you have a couple other vocal teammates who know what they're doing, they'll probably be drop calling up front for targets, and if you have lights, they could be drop calling target calling separately. And like I said before, that's a lot of talking in the drop. So, all that target calling and trying to keep track of it all, it's hard to keep with one person doing it, I feel, because it's a lot of responsibility for one person to do, and they don't have a view of what's going on the field entirely sometimes.
Yeah, I like having the lights have a light lance leader, so they can call their targets and movement separately. And so I'll direct the overall where to go, what to do, and then they pick their target and focus that way. And then with the main team, sometimes I assign a secondary, and if I happen to go down, I'll make use of spectating, and I'll cycle through the remaining teammates and start calling out things that are weak or about to die to try to backseat drive essentially. Sometimes it's actually easier to do that because you get more intel yourself firsthand than relying on it coming in piece.
Hey, Mag, do you have anything to add on to this, or should we move on?
No, that's about it, I think.
Okay. And the next question, and it's a question that I'm giggling a little inside at, is do you handle all 12 mechs, or do you hand off control at some points in order to make it easier on yourself?
Uh,
Go for it.
You're just laughing at handling mechs, aren't you, Siri?
Oh god, that wasn't...
there's going to be a lot of handling with those Stormcrow hands, the Ryokan hands.
Those are fucking terrifying.
Those tiny, you can handle. Anyways, so I don't feel like I'm. I think switching off that command is a good thing because, like I said, you're not as omnipresent the right word for it. Like you're not everywhere at once, and you have to rely on your teammates' eyes sometimes, and I don't think it's because to make it easier on myself. If you get used to drop commanding and shooting and just talking, it's like talking and driving kind of. Like when they first start teaching you how to drive, they want you to talk to you and the instructor's in the seat. because you have to multitask when you drive. You have to do a lot of other things. So drop commanding, you're driving your mech, you're talking. You got to get used to doing both of those things. That's kind of a given. And I think that goes for a lot of people on the team because everyone has to be communicative. It's not really to make it easier for someone else. It's just to make it more efficient for the team as a whole to switch off that command.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
I was
Anybody else?
just gonna. The only time that I'll hand over like complete control is in a really light drop. I am not what I would consider like a sufficient light pilot, to the point where if we have more light or fast medium mechs on the field than we have heavier assault mechs, I don't feel like I'm like, my tactics are okay still, but in terms of like target calling and micro positioning, I hand that over to a more experienced light pilot because I feel like they know what they're doing a lot more, and I have a couple people that I trust to do that. So
Carp and Meg.
Well, I mentioned before, I have the light lance lead and then sometimes a secondary drop command. Depends on the loadouts, right, and the kind of team composition. If you've got the type of decks where you're splitting off a lance of assaults from a lance of mediums, for example, you might assign the medium lance their own drop commander because they're going to be more mobile and moving to a different position, most likely from the assault team. So sometimes you break it down by lance. It just really depends on the drop deck.
We do use a light lance lead usually. I still will call if I want lights to be doing something, but the lights, most of their decision making is way too fast for me to be trying to monitor that while also moving the heavies. In the past, we've also sometimes had maybe a medium lead, and all that person's job was target calling and maybe a couple movements when we're attacking. But kind of gotten away from that. Doesn't seem to help as much now that we're at 12v12s. Back in 8v8s when the mediums, they had a little bit more impact with the sense, especially how they'd play, so it made sense to have somebody calling things for them, but not so much these days.
I remember when those scents were everywhere.
I'm refraining myself from asking how much you love your light lead, and I'm going to keep this professional and move on. But
That's the last thing this has ever been. Anyway,
okay,
what were we going to next?
let me just get back and check my notes quick. So, during different phases of a match, how does the focus of like what's going through your mind change at the beginning, in change in your mind and on comms? Anyone? Do you want me to?
Alright, I guess I'll go for it. So
Okay.
in the beginning, I'm trying to just figure out what the hell they have, what they might be doing in general. And we're just going to setup spots, basic setup spots, look at the lights going on, usually. As the game progresses, especially as you start getting some kills down and starting to look at where their weaknesses at, what can we possibly attack. So how I'm relating on comms might change a little bit from just trying to asking my lights a lot of questions to trying to position the heavies and force to be a little bit better position. Also trying to make sure that mechs aren't lagging behind if we're moving around and trying to keep track of everybody like that way. And then sometimes it transitions to target calling, just trying to make sure you're calling out the best possible targets to give your team the advantage, whether it's who's hurt. A lot of times I might call a target, but I won't have them selected because I'm already moving on to look at other targets to see who else might be hurt for the next target. And comms wise, yeah, at a certain point I just don't really talk to the lights very much, and I'm usually at that point I'm usually just calling targets and maybe some basic movements like push here, push that way. But a lot of times, honestly, once you get deep into a fight, everyone's kind of talking, calling out what's hurt and stuff, and the drop commander role starts to become less of a command role, so much as just filling in the gaps and making sure everyone's still on the same page.
Yeah,
Okay.
the only thing I would add on to that is that I sometimes feel like I don't necessarily need to say that much in a closer fight, except for calling targets. But when you really need to like speak up and yell is if you see something bad happening. Like if you see your mechs overextending in an engagement that they shouldn't and getting into a bad position, that's where you need to really kind of kick back in and take back over that drop commander position. Because I totally agree, it can slack in a lot of situations where you just don't need it if people are working well together.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I find that when the team is doing well, or you're against an opponent where you're really just kind of rolling over them, everybody just kind of goes into shoot, shoot. They just kind of know, like, this is what I shoot at because it's what everyone else is shooting at. You can visually see what's being attacked, and kind of got to focus that way. Now, when it's a big scrum death ball, like a 550 ton
Do you
drop
play
in Mark
rugby?
Civil War. Eh?
Yeah.
Scrum. Yeah.
Sorry, you said scrum. I was
Yeah.
caught on quick. Keep going.
Yeah, that's a rugby term. So yeah, when you do a 550 ton drop where it's just a big mess, it's kind of a free for all in the beginning until you start to identify some open components, and then you start to hone in from there.
Okay. Paimon, unless you have anything to add in, I'm going to move on.
Just a quick thing. Like I said before, echo what everyone else said, but I do feel like the comms focus changing during a match. I noticed some teams, like if you have one of those really long matches where there's an attrition battle or there's a quick engagement and then there's like this kind of back off sort of thing. It happens every once in a while, and a lot of teams, deep into a battle or deep into the game, start to lose focus on their comms, and I feel like it kind of bites teams in the ass later on sometimes, because if they had focused on their comms mid game, the end game would have ended differently. So I feel like making sure everything is flowing consistently throughout the whole entire game is important, because a lot of teams lose their composure when things don't go the way they planned it sometimes. So you have to try and keep that consistent, strong comms flow going throughout the whole match if you want to work as effectively as possible.
In other words, keeping your guys disciplined?
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, well, thanks, guys. And so we've covered the why you'd want to be a drop commander, because you're fucking insane, what you do before match, and kind of what you do during a match. And so it's one thing to sit here and just talk about these hypotheticals, and it's another to actually give an example. And so that's what we want to do, is we have a video of a pretty terrible drop caller just going through a competitive match. So we're going to try and...
Serious the drop.
It's actually Mag.
I know.
But we're just going to try and demonstrate for you guys all of these things tied into one, and hopefully it'll make sense, and then we'll do a dissection afterwards. So without further ado, once Raffle figures out which button to press...
Yeah, this is probably the worst
Raffle,
map for
press
you, but
button.
that's okay.
We can go take the right side hill.
Okay.
Reactor
one of us can.
online.
Because you don't get
Sensors
ticked off.
online. Weapons online.
Do my best.
All systems nominal.
Alright, otherwise let's move up towards the ridge. I mean,
Jen is just against
one
it.
Jen or fly up. You need to
We can't
fly, but get close to the ridge and just see if you can
I'll
do a
be-
drive-by through the... I want to know if they're pushing
Ben.
ridge right away.
I'll be able to see it from where I am on the right.
Okay. Salts, do not be on Epsilon side. I want you on the left side.
We should have standoff from the ridge until we figure out what they're doing.
Saw one thing setting up.
Alright.
Seriously, Twitch.
Yeah, let's just stay back from the ridge.
We can do like D4.
They're moving away from the ridge with two of their miseries. Or Misery and a Banshee.
They got
Yeah.
Theta.
They are going Theta. That's alright. They're looking for a point advantage. Don't get picked. Don't get too much damage. Where are they sitting right now?
They were heading toward, yeah, they're deep.
Deep heading B4.
New target acquired.
There's only one guy on Theta. Huh? I don't want to drop
I
lights
got
on.
Yeah,
I got a few blips Bravo 4, so that would be bad.
if we send our lights to Theta, they'll attack us when we send them.
New target acquired.
We don't have jets too, so it's not like we can get out real easy.
Yeah, they can get out better. They can go B4 ramp.
They're still
We'll
set
go-
up far back off the ridge. Bravo 4.
We could go city, but that's not really going to be helpful
New
other than
target
just not getting picked up. Because if we march ridge right now, we're going to get hurt. They have large laser AC-20 on those miseries.
They had a couple bigs shifting right. Let's let the Ravens get some work in.
Yeah, Raven, see what you can do.
Banshee coming up close C4. Still in the buildings, not pushing, but
If we can have one Jenner go Jenner highway,
Can-
just
can-
neutralize
Any of your
Theta.
generous have like UAV, you can put a little.
a Misery can probably take the ridge. They're not close to the ridge, they're sitting
Yeah, I can-
further back.
Got the UAV on ridge.
They just
They're
barely
firing
turned
at the
Theta.
ridge every time Jenners go there, so I don't
target
feel like we can
acquired.
push all our mechs up there.
Man, you should get one Jenner to
UAV
go
on ridge.
neutralize
Wait,
Theta.
they're going towards right. One Jenner where?
To neutralize Theta, they barely ticked it over. He just needs to run on it and back off.
Look where it is.
He can't
They
get
would just
back
drop
quick
on
enough.
us.
Are they going right C4 right now?
No, they're sitting B4 C4 directly in between on the line.
New target acquired.
Golf, corner of C4.
Let's move up. We're gonna push pocket, and then our Jenners are gonna hit from the right side. We're not gonna do pocket. We're gonna do some pocket, some over. So let's move up towards the ridge.
Mag, I'm gonna mark it for you.
Yeah, I get where they're at. I've seen a few of those targets there, so. But we have to do the engagement because of points. Let me see. Are all assaults over here?
People who go pocket should go first.
Yeah. Miseries are gonna go ridge because you're gonna get the ability to fire. Banshees. All of us up here. Ravens, you ready to build engage?
Yes.
Okay, let's go. Go in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Let's go.
Left guys, you're gonna be curling right soon. Golf is your first. Golf is completely exposed. Drop
Alright,
them.
golf.
New target acquired. New
Golf's
target
rear court.
acquired.
UAV up.
Lights you can, or Jenners at least, you can get on their lights. They're here with us.
New target acquired.
Guys, don't push off too much more. They're in that group there.
New target acquired.
Golf Banshee, still CT cord.
Hotel is red, orangish.
Golf, one hit.
I'm not with rest assaults because I got cords, so I had to sit.
Golf down. Juliet's pushing up right side. His right torso,
Got lights
Juliet.
His rear now. About to put
Jenner's
lights
on me.
Acquired.
Juliet
Rear on
Banshee
Juliet.
is way exposed.
Juliet, open RT near the court CT.
New
Highlander
target
strip.
acquired.
I like the Raven Delta or Jenner. Sorry, he's down. Nice. Lima
Juliet,
Jenner.
one hit.
Lima Jenner's cord CT.
Juliet down.
Rear CT.
Alpha rear
Assaults,
CT.
call your target.
Working, so 3 stalkers on the left side. CT on Delta, good job.
Right torso on golf. Right torso on golf. Fire
Foxtrot
starter.
strip, leave him. India's
Indigo
corn
Banshee,
CT.
CT.
Roger. He's down.
New target
The scoreboard looked back dead, guys.
You're way
Jenner
up.
legs.
Is it just lights left?
We have 2 down. They have
New
6
target
down. They
acquired.
still have some other guys, but maybe only one.
They're on me right now.
If anyone's really fucked up, grab Theta.
Let's get him off the
Doing it.
mag.
Okay, yeah. Let's
Five.
get Theta. If we have lights, Ravens, can you go get Theta?
We're on
New
it.
target acquired.
Thank you.
Fucking Twitch.
And then we have to continue this fight, but
going to Kappa.
Alright, let's get Kappa. Let's get Kappa, guys.
Golf,
Let's just get the points. We don't want to lose the points by chasing.
Yeah, let's get the
Twin
points.
Red on it.
Let's go get Kappa. We'll golf as we're going just so they can't cap our points.
I'm healthy enough that I can deny them, so I'll chase around and kill them.
I'm with you, Jaeger. Moving to Kappa.
You have streaks as well, so.
Okay. So from there on, it's basically just some capping and some light mech hunting.
And the outcome is that SJR had enough guys left up that they could spread out and decap all the points and get the kills. I forgot to mention this beforehand, guys, so I'm sorry, but that was the 800-ton drop from Merrick Civil War, and it had no jump jets and no strikes. So there's that. In any case, I'm going to nominate our first person to discuss and dissect that, the drop caller himself, Meg. What do you notice, and like just what sort of happened during that drop? Where was your mind at?
Oh, so no jump jets makes that for the scouting job difficult. So my first thing though, I still wanted the lights to be forward enough to be able to pick them up where they're moving, but also I don't want them to get killed by being exposed over the ridge, because it doesn't take that long for the other team to get in position to shoot them. We had Ravens that match, so the Ravens aren't really going to be doing much forward scouting because then they can't use the ER large. I thought most of it was pretty good. The team communicated well. Jaeger kind of kept me in check on a couple things, and the team on check on some things that was being discussed. We discussed a lot of it because there was a lot of time, so we could just kind of discuss what we were doing. I was talking about what I was thinking, what I was seeing, why I wasn't pushing up to the ridge right away, because I saw they had miseries, and I didn't think we'd trade well with them. And otherwise, once we pushed, I got caught I got cord, I think, as I was going through the pocket or so. And so I stopped in the pocket. I didn't keep moving around with the team as they kept moving left. And they did a really good job then of just picking up the calls and the communication on what they were shooting and seeing. So, yeah.
I was just going to mention something that I really liked was the awareness of caps, because it did get close. They did get to, like, what was it, 500 to 350? And as soon as you guys got to that point where you felt like, okay, this fight's pretty much won, I think it was the 3 to 6 at that point when you realized that they had a couple stripped mechs and you guys had more mechs down. It was immediately back on caps, make sure that this is in the bag.
Yeah, I was going to ask, Meg, how much pressure did you feel being in that situation where you were the one who had to make a move on the caps?
Well, we knew we weren't going to go for Theta, so you have to win the engagement. So you don't want to just force it. Yeah, there's plenty of time. When you're around 200 points, plenty of time. You start getting to 400 points, you still have time, but then if they're running away, they might be able to somehow survive it. I would say around 400 or 500 points is around your max that you got to start feeling forced to do the engagement. Luckily, we saw them moving over to the right, so that allowed us to take the ridge without just getting crushed. I mean, if they had been more up in a standard, say, spot where they'd be overseeing the ridge, it'd been really hard for us to do anything, because we would have at that point we would either have to push down to the lower part over to the right or something, and that would have been a little bit more pressure. But because where we knew they were at, I felt pretty comfortable pushing that pocket and going through. Also, with no strikes helps, because that means we can push without getting struck. So we know when we're pushing pocket, we're not going to have a strike put in there right away, and it's not going to hit 5 people who are trailing behind.
Right. Carp, Heim, either of you see anything that you really liked or think that could have been done better?
I really like the push and the spread on the team. They used both sides of the building in C3 when they went over, and just from Jaeger 12's viewpoint, he wasn't blocked yet. He was sort of in the back, like he was in between mechs. So there was sort of good lines of sight there from his perspective. And the Ravens, Magician, maybe you can elaborate. Did the Ravens stay back and just kept poking? Shooting in that
pretty much the entire time the Ravens were up on the sides, just shooting their ER large.
Yeah, and so I'm looking at the end of match screen, and the Ravens. Ravens had 3 kills, 384 damage, and the other one was 012 with 290 damage. So they did their job at just doing that early harassment and so on. So getting that close on caps is, I can imagine, can be unnerving depending on what mechs are left alive. So that's something that I think a lot of teams need to be aware of with Conquest, is that once you got about a 200-point spread, that game can get away from you even if you are ahead on mechs.
I was actually in one of the Ravens, and I think before the push, we really didn't get that much harass off, at least damage-wise. We had plenty of psychological harass in trying to keep their heads down, and, always trying to, be aware and not let us peek. But because they were so focused on us, we couldn't really start to get damage out until that push actually happened, and their tension went away. Heim, thoughts?
Yeah.
From a drop commanding perspective?
I generally actually liked it. I thought most of it was pretty good, pretty well called. Anything I say here, I mean personally, just for disclosure, I feel overly critical, but it's basically like how I would have done things from my perspective. I thought the Ravens going to the right off the bat is a really good idea. You have a giant open area at the bottom of the dropship. And you guys did have the scouting ability over there. It wasn't really necessary because all the Jenners would have done is gone up to the ridge, which is what I believe they also did. So it was, and that was just a quick scouting effort. The Ravens, like I said, they have the right side hard points with the ER largest. So if you got to poke, you can poke all the way back there. I noticed that at first it was about the kind of like the Raven attrition thing a tiny bit. You hear Jaeger at 205 say, let the Ravens do some work. But quickly you guys noticed the caps right around after that, and the objective became take the sliver of Theta back. But you kind of, Mag called it out, Mag pointed it out, Jaeger starts pointing things out. It's just not a good idea to engage them on that right side. So you guys pushed up to the left of the ridge, which was good, and it was well timed. The only thing I would have done different was basically from that push on. I felt like the push could have been a little bit more efficient, and this is just me being picky, but for example, at 4:15, there's this sort of split that I noticed where the lights were over by the bottom of the dropship, and even the Ravens were over there, and the assaults were over the ridge, and they had pushed. So when that happened, you had the assaults pushed. You had your miseries on the ridge with the left-hand hard points. I don't know if you guys are running those with the asymmetrical builds, but for example, if you had the asymmetrical build, it'd be good to go pocket, because then you could run across, take shots over the little, that 45-degree angle ridge with your asymmetrical and keep running. You could have the Banshees gone with them behind the buildings and maybe get some long-range support or something, or fire lasers in. And then I felt like the Highlanders would have been good to have at that ridge in between the building and the dropship for the push, because they had those right side hard points. So when you push those over the ridge, they might not have had as much damage soaking potential, but getting those miseries up close and getting those Banshees up close would have been a really good thing. I felt like it would have gotten SWK down a lot quicker, and also during that split that I was talking about around 4:15ish, I didn't personally like the lights being that far from the assaults. You had the two Raven 3Ls skirmishing in there, and they're meant for poking, kind of. I felt like if the Jenners were a little bit closer, trying to drag the enemy team towards them on that into that open area, some of the assaults might have had a chance to get a shot or two off on their lights, running after you guys, and it would have made chasing after the lights in the end a hell of a lot easier, and also, catching back caps. But like I said, that's me being overly critical. I wrote a little bit about it, so figured I might as well talk a little bit about it.
No, that I appreciate it. That wasn't actually kind of what I was looking for. I was thinking more along the lines of like the comms and such, right? And what elements you'd point
Oh,
out to a
sorry.
newbie.
Well,
But that's actually fine because it demonstrates something we haven't sort of talked about or we mentioned, but obviously showing the drop itself doesn't show it. But the sort of critical analysis that a drop caller is going to do on his performance, even if it went really well. And arguably that drop went really well. But you're right, there are always things you can improve with it. And what ifs and could have beens. And that's definitely one of the harder points on being a drop caller is that you're, as the leader, you'll have people second guessing, you'll be second guessing yourself, and you have to reach that, like decide which course is actually correct. And that honest analysis is one of the most difficult things, I think, of the role. Thoughts?
I was just going to add a comment on the push. There was a misery. India, I just reviewed it here while you were talking, and I was surprised that there wasn't actually a specific target called once you guys crested the ridge. And so I noticed that people were shooting at different things initially. And I mean, you ended up winning the drop, but there could have been a mech or two you may have taken down a lot faster with just that initial call on the push.
Out of curiosity, Meg, how much do you usually bounce ideas off of your players? Because you do it a lot at the start of that one, and I didn't know if that was like something you guys do commonly, or if that was just in that situation.
In a slower match, yeah, I think I put it out there usually. See what people think on certain things.
Okay.
Because I'm not. I mean, it depends what mech I'm into, and if it's a lighter drop, but I'm in like a heavy or an assault, then I'll probably put it out even more sometimes because I'm not really in those. The mechs are going to be leading the most of the engagement, so I need to make sure I get the feedback from them what they think is possible. But a lot of time, there's other times when there's not really that much feedback other than from the lights. You know, asking the lights, hey, do you think we can actually push this and not get killed? You know, things like that. But sometimes it makes sense to keep asking your teammates what they think, see if anybody has an idea. Because sometimes I don't know what the fuck to do.
Yeah, no,
I'm sitting there a job. I just have no fucking clue. Like I'm like, oh, we could do this, but this. Nothing really feels like it's gonna win, like necessarily gonna win. So I just see if anybody else has an idea.
Yeah. There are those times where you're like, oh, this is the golden play. You move in right here, and we've got this in the bag. But I just didn't know. Some people like to kind of rule with an iron fist when it comes to drop commanding, so I didn't know if that was common or if it was just kind of play by play.
Yeah.
Okay. Siri, what else you got for us?
Just over an hour, I think.
Yeah.
So, actually, kind of want to talk about that point you just raised, and it goes back to, I think it was Heim raised this at the very beginning, was structural versus free-flowing. And to me, that's also, like, when I hear structural, I think, like what you described, Iron Fist. And is that, like, to you, is ruling with an Iron Fist actually going to work, or how much leeway are you given?
In some cases, like, there are times when I see something and I know it will work, but it has to happen this exact way. And then then I'll tell people, like, you need to be here, you need to do this right now. And so, like, sometimes I think it's important to kind of like lay down the rules and stuff like that. But in other cases, like Mag's right there, you're not gonna just instinctively know what to do in every situation, especially if you don't have like perfect scouting information. You don't know exactly what they're bringing. You're just gonna be like, well, I mean, we could do this or we could do this, and having people that you feel comfortable bouncing those ideas off of is awesome. But there are times when you don't want that as well.
Anybody else? Don't feel pressured. If not, I have one further question.
You're talking about basically the free flowing versus rigid pros and cons, right? Basically.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's definitely pros and cons to both. The rigid one, you might get a little bit more. I guess people listening to you if that's what you're looking for. But if someone's looking to do their own thing, it kind of throws a wrench in the whole entire plan. And um, the free I the free flowing thing is something I've only experienced in teams that have a lot of experience with the game, and they all rely on each other a lot. I feel like if someone messes up, it's very clear and evident who's messing up. But then that's also a con of the free flowing thing is that you're relying so much on each other that you could have you should have paid more attention to yourself instead of just relying on someone else. But you got to find that right balance between both of them. I actually don't think it's good to look at it from a black and white way, because sometimes there are pros to being rigid and there's pros to being dynamic, and I think different situations call for different ones. Teams who are able to appropriate that and figure out when is best in the middle of a match, even they kind of get a feel for what works the best. Like for example, we might not when lords are playing, we might have someone who just gets very vocal because they notice something and they'll point it out, and just because they point it out, it all clicks in our heads right away, and we'll all just follow right away. And it's not really rigid so much as they're making a call. It's not like a rigid command structure where they're the top leader, but they're making a call like they were a leader in that moment. And the next moment someone else might be that leader making the same call. But it's like a very like I was saying, for that free flowing thing to work, you just got to have a lot of people who are familiar with the game to rely on each other. That's actually one of the cons, as it is the pros.
Hey, thanks, Simon. And if anybody has anything burning to suggest on this topic, otherwise I'll wrap up with one last question.
Well, I'll just say, like, rigid calls, both styles actually really rely on highly skilled pilots if you're going to do them properly. I think the free flowing can allow people to make decisions faster, because say you have your mediums are sitting over off to the right from your main force. If it's a rigid call, they're waiting for the drop commander to say exactly what they're supposed to do at that point in time, who they're supposed to shoot, when they're supposed to move, are they supposed to go around right? And if the other team pushes on the mediums, well, now the mediums are waiting for the drop commander to say what to do. Whereas if they have a little bit of freedom in decision, like you say, mediums, your job is to push on the right, you're to hold the enemy. If they push on you, you drop back to the assaults. You've already kind of set up what they're to do, but you also set up their role. And once they know their role, they can try to fulfill that role the best way they see possible, as opposed to relying on somebody that's away from their engagement, they don't have their eyes to tell them how they should be fighting that engagement. So I think it's good to use a mixture of rigid with free flowing. Back in the day, before turrets, and especially in 8v8, but even during 12v12, we'd use a lot of base pressure on assault mode, because assault mode's really all we were playing. A little bit of conquest, but base pressure to set up our attacks. Well, you can't really do that now, but that rigid style allowed us to do some of those things, like to time our attacks really, really well, that you couldn't necessarily do with a more free-flowing form. Not saying, I should say you couldn't do it, but it'd be less likely that you're going to do that. You're less likely to be able to put on immediate pressure on an enemy team if you don't have somebody that everyone's just going to necessarily listen to. I listen to a lot of games, and I see some people, when they're calling things, somebody will call something out, like they need to be doing this, and half the team might listen, half the team doesn't, and now you just don't really have any cohesion, and any team that's a little more disciplined is going to be able to win.
Okay.
Really quick, if you don't mind me adding on, that was actually a good point, is that it definitely changes depending on the game mode. Like for skirmish, for example, I think that free flowing thing works well because there's only a certain amount of positions on the map that your team can be at a time, and you pretty much know what's good for your mech and what's good for your teammates' mechs, or where your enemy is. It's a little bit easier to manage map position, so I feel like on skirmish the free flowing might work a little bit better. But yeah, for assault and conquest, a little bit more discipline and rigid stuff might work. It might benefit a lot more.
Not gonna lie, I kind of miss the days of 8v8 assault with no turrets.
Yeah,
you mean
me too.
tomorrow?
With no turrets.
With no turrets.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Because fuck turrets.
Close.
Any case, not beating a dead horse. The last question, the sort of thesis question that I've been trying to illustrate and answer tonight. If you had to tell a new unit or a new drop commander what to focus on his first little while in order to improve and possibly get to this level, what words of advice would you give them? If you need a moment to think about that one, feel free. And then just
Advice on if they want to start drop commanding.
To like a new unit though.
a new unit, or it could be an old unit with a new drop commander. So,
Well, so here's my advice. You're gonna lose a lot. Accept that. Accept that you're gonna try new things all the time and they're not gonna work. And if you're just doing what works every single time, you're not gonna learn. So you have to accept losing as a part of it if you're just starting out, especially. And they have to accept the drop commander is going to make mistakes. And you know what? Take time after each match and go over things. Like, don't hammer on somebody and say you were stupid here, you're stupid there. This is what we should have done is obvious or something like that. But just talk about what went on, what everybody saw, what might be able to be improved, and you'll get better over time.
Respecting your drop commander is a huge thing. Like, it can be hard sometimes, especially when you feel like you made a bad call, or she. I suppose there could be female drop commanders. But what it ultimately comes down to is he is that person that everybody's blaming, and he knows it, or she. So you've got to be careful about, like, when I'm drop commanding, I want to know what I did wrong, but I don't want people to be like, Ruffle, you totally fucked up, should have done this in this spot. I just like, yeah, I know, but it's like the little stuff, and it's how you present it to people. So make sure that you have a good group of guys that you trust, and make sure you have people that whose opinions you feel like you can rely on, and people that know how to present it to you in an adequate way, because that's really important.
Carper,
Yeah, I would say you're gonna take your licks early on, and it can be demoralizing to you and your team, and it's the attitude of the team. Like, you know, if you go in accepting the fact that you're gonna get your butts kicked, one of the things I've always said is, if you don't lose, you don't learn. And I think that's a really good mantra to have, is that you make it your goal to lose a little less the next time. And then eventually you start winning more than you're losing. And you're going to hit a point as a team where you're going to find that you're really stomping certain teams and you're not learning anything from those drops anymore. And that's when you welcome the challenging drops, because you want to improve. And the only way you're going to do that is facing teams that are tougher than you.
And Haim, any thoughts to wrap this up?
Yeah, I guess on a proportional level, echoing what Carp said. I don't know how anyone else goes about learning new video games, but I know Wispsy and myself have talked about this. We just kind of like to throw ourselves out there and pug matches and put the greatest challenge on ourselves in a match where it really doesn't matter that much, like a pug match, because you kind of push yourself to become a better person, and you find more opportunities to improve as a player or pilot. I think that echoes for a team as a whole as well. If you don't take those chances, if you don't challenge yourself and play against better teams, and you don't try and learn, if you're scared to lose, you're limiting yourself from having those opportunities and learning from them through that trial and error. And it really is the best just to continue through it with your head held high, and you just keep trying to improve. And some days it might get you down, but you're gonna find something. You're gonna find something to put a hop in your step. Eventually, you're gonna see improvement, and it kind of snowballs once you get up into the part where when you feel your team is getting really cohesive, you really start to get into it. It becomes something that's enjoyable to do, on a nightly basis, or however often your team wants to practice. It's just important to practice, and it's important to expect to try and learn when you're practicing. It's not always going to be a role of the other team. There could be a million things that could go wrong, and it's about adapting to what you experience.
Okay, great. thanks, guys. Oh,
I was going to add that also. I mean, watch Twitch streams of competitive matches to learn. I mean, I learned a lot watching Arhod season 1. Some of those finals that were casted, and that actually was very inspiring to watch those as a person who was a novice drop commander at the time. And they're exciting. I mean, the thrill of the battle and the adrenaline rush that goes with it. It's all super super fun, but you got to look at it as like, we're not being paid to command. We're not being paid here to win matches. Like, we have our real lives and careers, kids, family, school, whatever it is. So don't go, don't go beating yourself up too much over a couple of losses.
okay. Thanks, guys. And so I hope to our viewers there's been something interesting here and that you've learned a bit, and especially, like I was saying, to the newer guys, that if you do have further questions, watch streams, get even hop in TeamSpeak, sit down, discuss with people. There will be people you can go to for advice. And other than that, Raffle, if you just want to wrap this up with shoutouts.
Alright, let's do it. Let's do some shoutouts, starting with Heim.
I wasn't prepared for shoutouts, but a shout out for Wispsy because I don't play Smite with him enough, and I'll try and do that more often, I guess.
How do you deal with pronouncing his goddamn name? The second S throws me off so much.
I don't know. He criticized me once for it, and I felt bad, so I just make an effort to pronounce it correctly as often as possible.
Okay.
Sorry, I was responding to chat. Can we calm down? Next shout out is Magician.
I no clue. Who wants a shout out?
Your tournament tomorrow, maybe?
Anybody want one? What? Yeah, it's all 0 teams that have signed up.
Oh,
God,
seriously?
not bad.
Nobody signed up?
No one signed up. I wasn't sure if anybody would, so whatever. Maybe people will before. I'll put out another notice if anyone wants to do it. But
Oh, that sucks.
yeah, I don't know. I'm not that surprised. People are busy, so.
If you're interested, I think there's if people aren't playing matches, I think it might be cool to have like a pickup team game where you have random teams and you just do a little tournament through there. I don't know. I think it'd be cool to just get together to do something for the private matches, because I know everyone's going to be doing 1v1s and 2v2s and stuff.
It'd be really cool to get like some casted 2v2s going. I'd be up for doing that, or just like 1v1s. Just get like a huge bracket of 1v1 players and cast that.
It's not hard to organize now. Well, actually, yeah, because both 1v1 people need premium, don't they?
Well, no, because I could hop in for one person and then be in a spider and jump around and cast from
I see.
a somewhat third-person point of view, which would be really fun.
That's pretty cool.
I would do it if anybody wants to do that tomorrow. Poke me.
I'll be online.
Let's do it! But Madge, actually, do you have any serious shoutouts?
No, I really don't. I'm too fucking tired.
Dude, I know. I kept you up way late, so thank you for that. Carp, what about you?
Yeah, we had a match tonight, a coalition match with 10 Sky Rangers and 1st Sky Jaegers, so shout out to those guys. Unfortunately, no, Nightwatch Mercor did edge us out over 4 battles, so shout out to all those teams involved tonight for some GGs, and a shout out to guys who are activating their premium time tomorrow so that we can have private matches.
I have premium time until I get the rest of my premium time when clans come out. Super excited. Siri, what's your shout out?
My shout out is to... Oh, God. You know what? I don't have a serious shout out this week.
To God.
What?
It's nice shouting out to God, you know?
You know, BSK didn't show up, so they don't get that shout out.
He's one of our 26 viewers.
Okay. My shout out is going to Trebellius, who honestly can't believe that I am anything more than just a disembodied head in Raffles' little window here. Apparently, giving the fact that I had legs, a torso, and arms was too much for him to handle.
Dude, you guys didn't know I just summoned Siri out of a bottle, and he literally is just like a floating torso and head, and just comes on. He's like, Raffle, don't forget
No.
to do your shows.
Wait.
The actual thing was that he couldn't, I showed him a picture of what I looked like when I was working construction, and he just couldn't reconcile that image of who I was, but yeah.
I do have a shout out because it's kind of sad. It's a shout out to the end of waiting 3 hours to get a match. It's the end of 12 catapults into open queue, 12 Jenners, 12 Atlas DDCs, and all those other fun drops. So, the game's gonna die a little tomorrow, but it's also gonna get better.
I am gonna miss the 12 Jenner drop when you run into a team 2 times in a row, and the first time they've got a totally planned out build, and the next time you're like, okay, take this seriously, this is what they've got, this is from last time. 12 Jenners over there, you're like, what the fuck is happening?
That's kind of why we stopped shouting fun drop at the beginning of our fun drop, so that people would just be like, wait.
Your fun drop is 12 Highlanders, go fuck yourself.
When was the last time we did that?
Months ago, but I still like giving you shit about it. Okay,
Escort mission's gone.
Escort mission. Oh, no,
God
dude.
damn it.
We can do that for serious though, and with premium time it'll be fun. Alright, shout out to everybody who showed up tonight. Thank you guys for watching. I know that there's plenty of other stuff to do on a Monday, and that this is not a normal night. Also, thank you for putting up with my voice. I had a rugby tournament over the weekend and did a lot of shouting, so it's on its way in and out at the same time. But yeah, thanks for showing up. We're going to have hopefully a lot of fun the next couple weeks with these private lobbies. We're doing another show on Thursday, specifically talking about private lobbies and what they mean for competitions and stuff like that. So that should be a lot of fun. Not sure exactly who's on the guest list so far. Siri, myself, and I think Versinix is coming on. And then 2 more people yet to be determined. But yeah, until then, look forward to seeing all the fun stuff with private lobbies tomorrow. I will be bringing out my DDC with my SRMs now that they're going to work again. And yeah, it's going to be a good week. We're in a good place for MechWarrior guys. And until Thursday and beyond, thanks for coming out.
Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.